Good morning, artists. So we're going to do a draw along about facial proportions. And I would like you to draw with me and take these notes. Just doing this with me is a classwork grade. And there's no substitute for hands-on experience to help get something into your head. So again, the topic is facial proportions. Before you do this, you could pause now if you haven't done this already. It's in the instructions. Before you do this, go ahead and draw a face, however you would draw a face. There's no right or wrong to that, but I would like to see kind of a before drawing before we do this, and then see an after drawing. So topic, facial proportions. It's kind of funky for me to draw at an angle to this camera to do it for you, but so when we get started, so proportions just means the relationship of things to each other, making sure that things are in the right spot. So when we first start this, we're going to draw, and we want to use sketch technique. I'm drawing a little darker than you need to so the camera can see it, but we want to start with something like kind of a generic egg shape to do this. And notice I didn't just do one perfect line. I tried to find my shape and dial it in to get it a little more correctly. So that's a sketch approach, finding the shape, not just putting it straight down. And if you did your before drawing, I'm going to make from the top here, well, before I do that, I'm talking about the shape of the head. Now I'm going to draw kind of a generic human face with generic proportions. Obviously, the features on individuals are different. Some people have wider faces, different shaped faces, wider jaws, narrower foreheads, etc. We're going with kind of a generic egg shape. If you were drawing a specific person, you would make this shape more accurate to who they are, but the proportions that I'm going to do are pretty universal. The first thing I want to do is establish where the eyes go. Now, if you drew your picture ahead of time, you probably, I would bet that 80% of you drew your eyes somewhere up here, and then, your nose and your mouth, whatever you did. But you probably put your eyes somewhere towards the top of this oval that you made initially. This ends up being surprising to people that aren't in the know, but eyes are actually in the center of the head. Now, we tend to think that eyes are higher. Our brain tricks us into thinking eyes should be placed higher than they should be because we usually look at a face. And our eyes are towards the top of a face, but we're dealing with the whole head, not just the face. So when you include the crown of the head, the very top of the head, and the hair and everything, then eyes actually end up in the center. I think it can be a good idea for you to even use a ruler to find where the mathematical center is. I'm going to eyeball this here, but I'm going to make a line in about what should be the center of the face here. I'm going to make that's a horizontal line dividing that face in half. Make another line about vertically through the center of the head. Let's go ahead and take some notes here. Eyes equals center, and I want to see these notes when you turn this in. Center of head. And this is really important because if you don't get the eyes in the right spot, we kind of build everything off of where we put the eyes. So if you put the eyes in the wrong spot, you can throw everything off. So we're going to start with that. That's our generic eye line, and they go in the center of the head. And what we're doing, remember when we did the axis lines and basic shapes approach to sketching, we're still kind of doing that here. These are axis lines dividing the axis, the center of the head vertically and horizontally. The next thing I want to do is find where the bottom of the nose goes. And we've got kind of a little formula here. I'm going to go from the center of the eye line to the bottom of the chin. I'm going to find halfway, and then I'm going to come up. I would say it's about 20% higher, but just come up a little bit higher. And that is where the bottom of the nose would go. Now again, some people might have slightly longer or shorter noses. There's all kinds of human variability, but a generic average, this is where it would be. The mouth line. So I'm going to go to the bottom of the nose and the bottom of the chin, find about halfway, and then come up again about 20%. And that's the line where the mouth would be. And hopefully this is kind of starting to look like a face to you. I kind of see a face in this already, and we've just got some axis lines. So I'm going to go ahead and start building some things and talking about some other proportions. Well, first let me write this down. The nose just above halfway. I'm going to abbreviate halfway. Just above halfway between, I'm going to abbreviate between, BTWN here. Halfway between the eye line and the chin. So write this in your notes. I'd like to get to the point where you actually have this memorized. Mouth line. You remember what I said that was? Mouth equals just above halfway between nose line and chin. So there we go. Now, I'm going to get into a little bit later drawing specific features. For now, I want to just get the generic placement for the eyes. The eyes, one thing to know is that the distance between the eyes is equal to one eye width. Distance between eyes one eye width. But you didn't know there's this much math in art. So we're talking proportions here. Now, how do I figure that out? Assume a little bit wider out here for how far the ears would stick. So if we take this and, let's see, there's a couple different ways to approach this, but I'm going to stick with the halfway ideas here. I'm going to go from the edge of the head to the middle, and about halfway between there is where I'm going to have the center of the eye. About inside halfway. So about halfway, and then I'm going to come inside a little bit. Now, if I divide all this up, so that's the middle of the face, about one eye width. So when I say this part, distance between the eyes is one eye width, that's one eye width there. And one eye width here, that's about how wide the eyes would be. And so it would fit in there. And right now I'm going to do just kind of a generic rainbow line. And again, I'm drawing darker than I would be if I were really sketching this for myself. I'm drawing darker so you can see it in the video better. So go about halfway between, and that's about where you'd put the eyelids. So these should match up. Now, one more eye width would go out to where the edge of the ears are, generally speaking, but this is okay for now. So you want to get this fit in here, one eye width. The bottom of the nose, over here, there's something you need to know. I'm going to draw a little dotted line coming straight down, a vertical dotted line from, think about your tear ducts, that little circle in the corner of your eye. So from about there, if I come straight down, that's where the edge of the nose is for most people. Now, some people can have noses that are a little more wide, a little more narrow, but on average, the edge of the nose aligns to the tear duct. So I'm going to draw a little arrow out here, write this note down. Edge of nose aligns to tear duct. And that's why we got to get the eyes right. If we don't get the eyes right, everything else falls apart. I just wrote tears. So to the tear duct, that little ball in the corner of your eye where the tears come out, and also where you get sleep in the morning. You have to rub out that sleep in the morning, comes from there. For the bottom of this nose, just a quick little note about noses. I can kind of make a sideways, kind of like a number 6 laying on its side, or you can think of that perhaps as a teardrop shape, and then the mirror image on the other side, perhaps a number backwards, number 9 or something. And it kind of curls in on itself, and that kind of goes down. Outside of that, or these things that I already drew, would be the outer edge of the nostrils. Now, a nose can be a pretty complex thing, and we'll do some stuff where we practice noses a little bit. Noses have a lot of interesting planes and shapes, and and everybody's is a little bit different. Noses can be challenging to draw. But I'm going to stick with this kind of generic formula, kind of that sideways 6 and the mirror image on the other side, and like some parentheses almost outside of that. The next thing that I like to do, we've got everything generic here. Edge of nose aligns to tear duct. When I start to make the mouth, one thing I like to do, you know that little dimple right under your nose and above your lips? I like to draw that in. And that thing's called the philtrum. That little divot underneath your nose is called the philtrum, P-H-I-L-T-R-U-M. And I like to draw that because it helps really make sure that the relationship between the mouth and the nose ends up correct. Because a lot of times students draw a mouth way down here and a nose way up here, and there's this big weird gap of negative space. This helps avoid that. This helps you get it in the right spot. Coming to do the mouth now, though, the corners of the mouth. Now, the corners of the mouth aren't necessarily the corners of the lips. Sometimes our corners kind of extend further than our lips do. But the corners of the mouth generically align to the center of the eye. And I can't help but wonder. So, the center of the eye. Corner, I'm going to make some notes over here. Corner of mouth. And when you're drawing, look at your own face. Check it out. See where things line up. Look in the mirror. Study yourself. You've got yourself available all the time. Aligns to center of eye. Go ahead and take that note. So corner of mouth aligns to center of eye. Now, I'm going to go ahead and draw some lips here. And this center line between the lips, think of like a letter M that's been flattened. So there's kind of a little curve, and then the center of the M and another little curve. Almost like people draw almost like an upside down version of, people like to draw the birds like that. Slight curve, smaller. So the smaller curve, slight curve comes out to the corner, slight curve. Again, people's smiles and lips vary. Some people have thinner lips, thicker lips, etc. The lips themselves, this would be the top, this would be that philtrum area here. And then this kind of just comes down, and the lip doesn't always actually come to the corner of the mouth. Sometimes the corners extend a little bit further. So this would be the top lip. And then, nice full lips there. And then the bottom lip, usually, not always, but usually is a little bit inside the top lip. Some people have a wider bottom lip, different variations of people. So there's that flattened M shape. I'll connect these, my philtrum. And that bottom lip usually is inside the width of the top lip, but not always. It can vary person to person. And so that's kind of generic lips. And we're going to practice drawing some facial features on their own without even being in a face. Because one thing that often happens with students is you're so used to drawing things a certain way, you don't stop to really look. You're like, oh, well, I know how to draw an eye. An eye looks like this. And you draw something like that. And you make an almond shape with a circle in it, and maybe another circle. And eyes, that is a symbol for an eye. Eyes don't actually look anything like that. I'll do another thing where we talk about facial features, and I'll show you why that's not true. So there we go. There's that. Now, eyebrows are above the eyes. They don't touch the eyes. Sometimes when students draw eyebrows, they have them sitting right on the eye. Well, we have a little gap. We have eyelids. And also, you don't have to draw this. You can if you want. Think about the fact that our eyeballs are sitting inside of an eye socket. Picture the skull underneath. So that would be the eye socket, something like that. You know, big ovals, and the eyeballs sit inside that socket. Well, our eyebrows wrap around that eye socket. They're right on the edge of that eye socket, and that's what gives them the shape that they have. So an eyebrow shape is kind of like, picture a tapering rectangle that kind of leans in a little bit, leans down a little bit, and then at the end kind of curls back. Again, you know, some people trim their eyebrows differently. Some people have thicker eyebrows, thinner eyebrows. Every individual can have a somewhat different shape, but I'm just kind of doing some generic proportions here. So the eyebrows are sitting on the eye socket. I'm going to make a note, eyebrows on eye socket. Now, when you're sketching a face, you don't have to actually sketch in that socket. Kind of shade these in a little bit more so you can see it better. So that's what's happening there. It's wrapping around that bone that is above our eye. Our ears. Now that we got those eyebrows, we can do the ears. Generically speaking, the top of our ears tend to stick out a little. Some people stick out a lot, some people's barely stick out, and there's everything in between. But our ears, the bottom of the ear is generally aligned to the bottom of the nose. So there's the bottom of the ear. And I'm just going to kind of make a little kind of generic hook shape. My earlobe sticks out more. Some people barely have an earlobe at all. I'm just going to make some things. But right now, the important part for the proportion is that the top of the ear aligns about to the eyebrow, and the bottom of the ear aligns to the bottom of the nose. So that's the proportion there. So let's write that down. Hopefully you still have some room here. Top of ear aligns to top to eyebrow. Semicolon, bottom of ear aligns where? Aligns to bottom of the nose. I'm just going to put to nose bottom. And if you're ever in doubt about this stuff, just look in a mirror. Look at yourself straight on. Now, all of these rules start to change when the head starts looking in different directions and looking up and down and sideways and stuff. Right now, we're just dealing with generic straight-on facial proportions. And this could be a good thing to practice. So you're doodling, killing time sometime, you got to sit somewhere and wait. Practice these faces. And these proportions also work for starting to make even cartoons and cartoon characters and comic figures and anime and things like that. Now, anime starts to stretch proportion. They make these giant eyes and everything. But I'm a big believer that learning things formally helps you be better at being more creative with doing things differently. So it's never a bad thing to learn the formal approach before you start to get more creative. Next, I want to talk about the hair. Now, sometimes students will make hair and they'll just draw it inside this line here. Well, if you're a bald person, or maybe if you've got a super, super close, tight haircut, that just sits on the crown of the head, something like that could be true. But for most of us, the important thing to know is that the hair extends beyond the crown of our head. Our hair doesn't just lay flat and smooth on that crown, bald dome at the top of our head. It extends out. It's beyond the edges. So our hair sits on top. And depending on your hairstyle, it might kind of lay down in the front. If you got a little part here, it lays down across the forehead. It depends on the hairstyle of the person. But the important thing to know is I'm going to just write hair extends beyond crown. There's the crown. The crown of the head is that bald part that the hair grows out of it. So hair extends beyond crown. For male or female, that is true. So that's another thing to know. So there's the hair. A lot of times also students will make a bunch of lines for hair. Don't worry about making lines. You can just treat things like a big shape, like a big mass. Don't worry about trying to draw a bunch of individual little hairs. And when we will come with that. The neck. Now, if you're like me, a little heavy set and thick, then your neckline probably extends like right under your earlobes and maybe even comes out that way a little bit. If you're a lean person, your neckline might align to inside the eye there, so it depends on the person and their build. But the neckline is going to be anywhere from like the corner where the earlobe meets the face to narrower than the edge of the face, aligning to about the eye line, the outer corner of the eye. So those are parameters there. So let's write the notes of the parameters. I'm going to write that out here. Neckline, anywhere between abbreviate between BTWN, earlobe and outer eye corner. Earlobe and let's say corner of outer eye. So there's that neckline. I'm going to come in here. So anywhere in this region here is where the neckline might be. Now I want to tell you one more thing. Look in a mirror, look at yourself. A lot of times students will draw a face, they'll make a generic head, they'll make the neck, and then they'll put the shoulders down here connected to the very bottom of the neck. And if we were giraffes, maybe that would be true. I'm going to mess with the phone a little bit and just do a double check that this is actually recording, because I hope. Okay, so a little break there. I'm going to continue with this. So we were just talking about the neckline, the hairline. And the shoulders. I had mentioned that a lot of students will draw the head, they'll draw a neck coming down, and then they'll draw shoulders coming out of that. Shoulders, though, if you look at an actual person, if you're looking straight on a person's shoulders, actually tend to be kind of behind the chin, and the neck comes into the body. So let's avoid these giraffe heads. And what I think happens a lot of times with students is shoulders end up becoming an afterthought. They just kind of throw them on there. But let's really look when we're drawing as well and see, hold up a pencil and look at where the shoulders would be. So if you're looking straight on somebody, usually the shoulders are going to be kind of going through the bottom of the chin. And that neckline comes into the body, and there'd be a clavicle, etc. But pay attention to that. So last note, shoulders tend to be along the bottom or right behind the chin. Shoulder line at or above chin when looking straight on. A lot of stuff starts to change as soon as you look at things from different angles. So don't just draw shoulders down here. That's so crazy off that it just doesn't make sense. Last but not least, in the next video, I'm going to go into drawing specific facial features, and we're going to practice that, but I just want to show you a quick, if you're going to do a shortcut, one thing that's always true, unless your eyes are just bug-eyed with shock and surprise, is that the top of the eyelid overlaps the top of the iris. So the iris is this part with the color, the pupils, the black part here. So the top of the eye line overlaps the top of that. And then these, the bottom of the eyelid is usually overlapped by the corner. So we'd have a tear duct here, that would overlap. So it's not just an almond football that connects at the corners, because it doesn't actually do that. So I'm going to make a circle that's being overlapped here. Another circle inside, so that's the iris, that's the pupil, there's the tear duct. This kind of comes in and comes up underneath that fold there. So that's kind of a generic eye. So there we go. Biggest takeaways for proportions. There's one eye width between the eyes. The eyes are in the center of the head, they're not at the top. Triple check yourself that you're not drawing your eyes up where the forehead would be. Remember, it's the center of the head, not the center of the face. Nose, between the eye line and the chin, just above the center. Then the nose line to the chin, just above the center is the mouth line. Neckline between the chin and the corner of the eye. Sides of the nose aligned about with the tear ducts. Corners of the mouth aligned with the centers of the eye. So that's generic proportions. Again, we'll look, if we're drawing an individual specific person, we look a little bit more closely, but that gives us a basis to compare things to. Okay, is their nose actually at their tear duct, or is it a little bit less or a little bit more? That gives us something to look at and check for things. So that's it for now. And turn this in with these written notes as a graded classwork assignment.